Would you like to learn how to perform data analysis in Excel? If so, this is the perfect video for you. Hi, I'm Brian Amrine with Value Driven Analytics, and in this video, we're going to learn about Excel data manipulation as we build a personal finance budgeting and savings forecasting tool. In this video, I'll give you a tour of the Excel interface and the Excel ribbon. We'll go over how to create and rename tabs, remove grid lines, and use the spell check feature. We'll learn about the undo and redo keyboard shortcuts that can be used in Excel and other applications. And we'll also talk about how you can insert, copy, or delete cells, and many other Excel features as well. If that sounds good to you, let's head over to our PowerPoint where I'll provide a brief overview of data analysis in Excel before we get into our hands-on demo in the Excel application.
Okay, let's talk about Excel at a high level before we actually get into the tool. This is a review from our last session. We talked about a lot of tools for data manipulation in the introduction to analytics session. Let's just do a quick review of the way that Excel is kind of differentiated among those tools. As we mentioned last time, Excel is essentially a set of worksheets, and a worksheet is a set of rows and columns that can have multiple tables potentially, multiple charts, and other visualizations. And one of the cool things about Microsoft, maybe a reason why it's so popular, is most organizations purchase an Excel license for their employees by default. It's often part of their Microsoft license. And it's been around for a long time. So there's a lot of people that are used to doing data analysis, data manipulation in Excel. And it is fairly flexible. But the biggest downside for me with Excel is that a lot of it is done manually by pointing and clicking. It can make Excel repetitive, sometimes inefficient, but on the other hand, it does make it really easy to learn, one of the easiest analytics tools to learn. One thing that can help with that some analysts invest in, is learning the language VBA, which can be used to create macros. And there's other advanced functions that can allow Excel to be automated to some extent. You know, I've found that Excel tends to be the tool of choice for many financial analysts, oftentimes supply chain analysts as well, even some analysts that are focused on marketing and sales and other departments as well, and especially at analytics level maturity 1 organizations. Excel tends to be a really popular choice for data manipulation and data analysis. A lot of times when organizations are using Excel for reporting, they are emailing it out as a report. And sometimes before they get to that step of emailing it out, they're having to refresh it in various ways. Some could be as quick as just refreshing some pivots. In other cases, there's a lot of dragging and manually populating things and copying things. In some cases, hours of manipulation that has to happen in order to send out an Excel report, which is not ideal. Most of the time when it's sent out, the recipient has a limited ability to drill into data. So if they're seeing a particular trend, they're going to have to go back to the analyst and maybe ask, oh wow, it looks like we're seeing a certain trend. Can you break this down for this geography or this business segment? And now the analyst is doing more manual work and sending that out, and there could be more follow-up questions after that. And that's the difference between Excel and doing your reporting and an interactive visualization tool like Power BI and Tableau, where if it's set up right, the stakeholder can drill into those trends on their own. That's self-service BI right there. And so a lot of organizations have gone that way. But Excel workbooks tend to also be used for quick data exploration and analysis. It is very quick to do a data manipulation there in a point and click way. So it can definitely make sense to do that. And it's very useful as well when you have a situation where you have certain inputs or cells that you want to be able to change and see how it impacts the rest of the analysis just by changing a single cell. And you can do that with Excel, as we'll see in our, especially our personal finance and financial modeling use cases today. Excel is great for that. Now, it doesn't have much capability in terms of building data science models. There are some things you can do with certain add-ons. You can build a regression model, some statistical tests, but it's not necessarily the most efficient way to do that, or especially when you want to refine and really go deep with your model. Excel is probably not the best tool for you. You want to use an advanced analytics tool like Python, R, or SAS. Now we're going to get into our first Excel demo. We're getting into Excel to build a spreadsheet that you can use to track your income and your expenses and forecast that out over time, perhaps to plan out your savings goals. I'm so excited to show this to you. It's a great example of how Excel can take certain inputs and you update those inputs and the whole rest of your model automatically updates. That's a way that Excel is particularly unique among all the analytics tools we're going to take a look at. So let's dive into Excel. All right, here we are in Excel. Hopefully you've been able to open it up, and we are in what's called an Excel workbook, and we're about to design our own personal finance workbook. Now within a workbook, there can be multiple worksheets. By default, one gets created called Sheet 1. We see that at the bottom. And if we want to rename that, we can simply right-click on it and then say Rename. And we'll call this one Budget. Give it a good intuitive name. And as you can see at the bottom, you can create multiple sheets within a workbook, multiple worksheets within a workbook. So here's another one, and we could rename these. I don't like to have any unnecessary tabs, so I will go ahead and delete these by, again, right-clicking on it, where you can rename, or in our case, delete. And that's a worksheet in Excel. Now what you'll also notice here is we have several different tabs at the top. Home screen has a lot of your frequently accessed things like the text color and highlighting, merging cells, all kinds of things. And we'll take a look at a few of these, but you also have the option to insert pivot tables and certain types of charts on the Insert tab here, drawing, page layout. One of the things that we will turn off eventually, we'll go ahead and turn it off now, is grid lines. Now this might be controversial. Some people like to have the grid lines. It provides some structure to the worksheet, but I tend to feel like it has a cleaner look without the grid lines. So I'm going to turn off the grid lines, and that is an example of a page layout option. Just uncheck that. Now you can see all those grid lines have gone away. Some people like them, some people don't. I think it gives it a cleaner look not to have them. Formulas, data, operations, we'll see some examples of this. You can review your work to spell check, which is important because unlike PowerPoint and Word, Excel doesn't necessarily give you the red squiggly line when something is misspelled. So it's a good idea to perhaps use spell check at a certain point. And if I maybe did fruit and I misspelled it, and then I click on spelling here, I'll say, do you want to continue at the beginning of the sheet? Yes. And it finds that and it says make some suggestions here. So it's important to use that spell check. It will not give you that red squiggly line when a word is misspelled. So we can update it from there. Just one example of review functionality. View, now you can do some really neat things here like freezing panes so that when you scroll a certain column will stay at the top or a certain row will stay at the top. Lots of neat things you can do there. And then you've got a automation tab. I haven't used this much, and then a help screen too. Now something that'll be helpful in our case, as you can see, we're a little zoomed out and it's a little hard it'll be a little hard to read the screen. So one thing I can do, I can either use my mouse scroller for this, or in the bottom right here we have a zoom option. I'm going to try to help you out and zoom in a little bit. There we go, that's a little better. And we can also take this formula bar here, which we'll eventually use to write formulas, and we will bring that up a little bit too, which will create some more space for us. But as we mentioned, this Excel workbook can be made up of multiple worksheets. In this case, it's one worksheet called Budget, and a worksheet is a set of rows, which are based on numbers, and columns, which are identified by letters. And eventually, if you keep going and going, it starts to become 2 letters. So that's how Excel labels rows and columns. Now we can have text, we can have data tables, we can have charts, all kinds of things. And you can put multiple of these things in a single worksheet. So there's lots of layers of organization, worksheets within workbooks, and then tables and charts within a worksheet. All right, so that's your very brief Excel overview, and we'll go over a lot of other functionality as we build our own budget and our personal finance workbook. So the first thing we're going to do is we might want to have an income section where we'll keep track of our different sources of income. And it's good to just generally label things. So to start out, I am just simply going to go to a cell, and you can just click on that cell. This would be cell B2, and I can either start here, or I can just even click on the cell. I can double click on it, and then you see the cursors there. We can even just click on the cell though and just start typing, and I'm going to type some letters. The word income, simple as that. Now for us, there will be a couple of sources of income in our example. First one would be salary. So we'll make that its own row. Now notice I skipped some space here. Whether you're in Excel or any analytics platform, use spacing strategically. Just because we're analysts doesn't mean art or intuition goes out the window. No, we want to set things up to be aesthetically pleasing, and so if spacing helps organize things, use spacing. We'll do that here. Separate the section that we're in the income section, from the actual line items within the income section. So salaries are first one. And let's say we also have some savings, and perhaps it's invest in the stock market or bonds or some form of investment that we expect a return on those savings. So that'll be another row for us, return on savings. And let's say those are only 2 sources of income. Now you can customize this for your situation and have however many sources of income you have, and whatever those are, make a row for each one. Those will be our 2 for this example, and below that we'll simply type a total for them. So a total income. That'll eventually just be the sum of our salary and return on savings. And that's our very simple income section. Now, of course, the next part in our budget would be our planned expenses. And so we'll give that a title as well. Just call it simply expenses. Most people have rent or mortgage. And so we will, in this case, we'll call it mortgage. That'll be our first expense here. Might also have a car payment. Now we could go more granular. In some cases you might keep it high level and perhaps represent multiple car payments if you have multiple car payments in one car payment line item, or you might split it out for the individual cars. You can be as granular with your budget as you want to be, as you find it to be useful. In this case, we'll keep it high level and say we only have one car payment, or maybe we have multiple and they're going to be represented in the same line. So one line for car payment. Similar concept for utilities. We'll summarize all of our budgeted utilities in one line item, but you might separate it out for power and gas and all of that. All right, we'll also have a line for groceries. We'll also make a line for other. Everybody needs an other bucket. No matter how granular you get, you probably can't account for every single line item. That would probably be too complex of a budget, so you're always going to need some form of an other category, I think. Now, here's the thing about Excel. We've plotted out a few different categories so far. Let's say we missed a few that we want to put ahead of mortgage. For this example, let's say that we want to insert a row for taxes and maybe a row for giving as well. Well, one way to do that is to simply shift cells down. And so I would go to the cell where I want to put a cell above it, right above mortgage here. and I would right click on that cell and then say insert, and in this case I would want to shift the cells down one, and so I choose shift cells down, and now I have a new row here and I can type taxes. So that's one way of doing that. Now I want to show you a different way, but in order to show you that way I want to undo what I just did. Now this is where keyboard shortcuts can really save you some time. It's a good efficiency play to learn certain keyboard shortcuts, and there are a lot of them in Excel, but there's a few that I definitely recommend, and the one I'm about to tell you about applies not only to Excel but almost any application you use. You can use it for Power BI and many other applications. So what I did is I just inserted a cell, moved everything down, and what I'd like to do is undo that change. And so in order to do that, I'm going to type on my keyboard. I'm going to first hit Control, hit Z, and then let go of both keys. Control Z, let go. And it undid the change. Really neat. Now if you wanted to redo that, maybe you said, no, I kind of like that, having that cell there. You can do Control Y, let go. So Control Z to undo and Control Y to redo. Now I'm going to undo that because I want to show you another way of shifting cells. This is my preferred method for inserting cells. A lot of times if you want to move everything down on a row, in this case there's only one column here, so either method would work. But if you wanted to insert a row above everything, like let's say we had other columns that were populated like that, what I would do is highlight that row. Just click over here in the margin to highlight the entire row. And similarly, if you wanted to do this from a column perspective, you can just click on a column. So if I click on a cell, it does not highlight the whole thing, but if I click on a letter or a row's number, it highlights the entire thing. Click on that number, right click on it, insert, and there you go. You have a row, an entire row insert into your Excel workbook. Delete these out. So we wanted to add a row for taxes. We also wanted to add a row. I'm going to add it right before mortgage. So I'm going to highlight row 11 that mortgage is on, right click, insert, and then type giving. Great. Well, that'll be our expenses for this example. And so at the bottom, I will also create a title for a total expenses row. Great. Well, we've got our salary, we've got our expenses. Now, one reason we might want to create this budget is because we'd like to plan out our savings goals. And so let's create another section for savings. So we'll start with the title savings, and the first thing we'll do is create a category or a line item for savings. What were our savings this year? There might be a better title for this, but we'll call it just simply savings. What were our savings for this year? And then below that, we will create another row for savings balance. And that's going to factor what our savings were at the beginning of that year, and after the savings we plan on having for the current year, what do we anticipate our new end of year savings balance to be? That's what the savings balance row is intended to represent. All right, so those are our categories for this example, and next we are going to get into parameterizing our Excel workbook, where we'll have some inputs that will then feed into the rest of our spreadsheet. Well, we've got a great start for our budget. We have laid out our categories, but now we want to potentially insert some parameters at the top of our Excel workbook that we can update, and then those updates would automatically flow through to the rest of our budget. In order to do that, similar to before, we need to make some space at the top of our Excel worksheet here. I'm going to click on income, and I'm going to create some room for parameters. So I right click on row 2, say insert cell. I'm going to insert another cell, and I You can see it's a little repetitive what I'm doing. Now here's another method, and this works for whether you have blank cells like we have here and we want to create more blank cells, or if you have a particular section that's not blank and you want to copy it or cut it. You can highlight multiple rows, and likewise you can highlight multiple columns. Highlight multiple rows, and I can copy all of those and then click on the row I want to insert them into. Say insert copied cells. And similarly, if I were to highlight all of those and say cut, that is going to remove them from there. Once I insert them in a particular place, they are now removed. So that's the difference between copy and cut. I'm going to undo that by using the Control-Z shortcut. And there's also actually some redo options and undo options here if you don't want to use the shortcut, keyboard shortcut. Now what we're going to do is do that with the blank rows here to create even more space. So I'm going to highlight all 4 of these blank rows. I'm going to right click on them, say copy, and then I'm going to highlight on row 5, right click, say insert copied cells. All right, now we're creating some space faster than just inserting rows one at a time. I might do that one more time. I'll probably create about 12 rows here at the top. Great, I've created some space.
If you like this video, I hope you'll consider liking it formally. And if you'd like to see more analytics, data science, and leadership training videos, please consider subscribing to the channel. Finally, if you have any questions on what we discussed today, please leave a comment and I'll try to respond to it as soon as possible. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.